From WHYY, it is Hittin season. Hey there, podcast pals. I'm John Stolnis from The Good Fight. You can follow me on X and Blue Sky at John Stolnis. Coming up, we're going to talk about the Phillies here in the final week before the All-Star break. We'll talk a little Zack Wheeler and the incredible performance he had on Sunday, helping the Phillies win a series against the Reds, in which a lot of frustration we saw from the Phillies offense, by the Phillies offense, frustrating us during the course of the weekend. And we'll talk a little bit about that, but we'll talk about the Phillies All-Stars. We'll talk about the players who got snubbed a little bit. We'll also talk a little trade deadline we are now in July, so it is officially hot stove season now. I want to get into a little BRYCE Harper conversation as well, and some big news here in the National League East this week with the Phillies rivals. So we'll get on to all that stuff coming up here in just a few minutes on this roundtable edition of the podcast. And Justin Klugh, Liz Roscher, both joining me. Liz, of course, from Sabres Baseball Research Journal. You can follow her on X and Blue Sky at Liz Roscher. Liz, how you doing?
I'm doing fine, thanks. I really enjoyed watching the Zack Wheeler complete game. That was glorious. I didn't catch a lot of baseball this weekend or the past week, but it was nice to tune in and see that.
Incredible performance on Sunday against Zack Wheeler. We're going to talk about that in just a second. That's our lead story here on not lead story. Justin Klugh from Baseball Prospectus. Follow him on Blue Sky at Justin Klugh. Justin, what's the good word over there?
I got a lead story for you.
Oh, hot one.
Let's hear it.
So Zack Wheeler forced to share National League Player of the Week honors.
I saw that.
With the Cubs' Michael Busch.
Who is that?
Now, to answer that question, Michael Busch is the guy hitting .565 in the month of July, which is 1 week old. So he's hit .565 in the week that he was named Player of the Week. Fine. He hit 4 home runs in that week. Fine. But three of them were in one game, which, is also impressive. But the Cubs hit 8 home runs in the game in which he hit 3 home runs. They would have won if he hadn't homered at all, whereas the Phillies might have choked to death on a hot dog if Zack Wheeler hadn't pitched the way he pitched in his last start. So why he's sharing this with Michael Busch, total mystery to me.
Yeah, it sounds like he could have been player of the game for that 3-homer game, and we could have left it at that, and everybody could have had a hearty handshake and slap on the back. But, questionable.
A light slap on the back.
Eternal Phillies disrespect. That's all I got.
It never ends. It never ends. And we're going to get to some of that.
I don't know why, but everyone hates us.
This is a betrayal on levels previously unseen.
That's right. Unprecedented betrayal here of the Phillies. We've never seen anything like this before. Let's talk more about Zack Wheeler's start on Sunday. Obviously, a historic performance in Phillies history. Only base runner allowed, the home run to, of all people, Austin Hayes. Took him opposite field in the 5th inning on Sunday afternoon, and that is the only base runner Zack Wheeler allowed the entire afternoon. I didn't even realize it until we got to about the 7th inning or so. I started thinking to myself, I don't think anybody else has gotten on base other than the home run. So, I mean, you had essentially Zack Wheeler came this close to a perfect game. That's the kind of stuff that he had on Sunday. And this comes after he already won Pitcher of the Month for the month of June when he had an ERA under 1. Justin, Zack Wheeler he's been pretty dialed in for most of his tenure in Philadelphia. This is the best he has ever thrown here in his age 35 season in Philadelphia. The best performance since Roy Halladay's no-hitter on Sunday in the playoffs on Sunday from Zack Wheeler.
If he wants that National League Cy Young, all he's got to do is keep pitching at an unthinkably historic level for the rest of the season.
He's going to get it.
It's that simple, folks. No, I was thinking...
even then they won't give it to him.
Even then, Paul Skeens.
Yeah.
He's new and exciting still.
And what about like some of those Cubs pitchers they like? There's always going to be a trendy pick. Just give it to him. Just give it to him now. Give it to him at the All-Star game.
Right now.
Honestly. That's fine. Then he doesn't even have to play in the All-Star game. Well, anyway, I was thinking about pitchers the Phillies have traded for or signed and are known as like some of the best in franchise history. And most of them are guys who figured it out somewhere else, and then the Phillies signed them because they were good. Steve Carlton was pretty good immediately upon getting to the major leagues. It was his contract disputes that got him traded from the Cardinals. Jim Bunning was an all-star a bunch of times with the Tigers before the Phillies traded with him. And just sidebar, it's wild that in his 17-year career, he played like 6 non-consecutive years with the Phillies and like 8 with the Tigers, but the Phillies retired his number. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway,
It's the Hall of Fame. That's all it is.
but yeah, those two guys, and then you have like the 2011 squad, Oswalt, Lee, Halladay. These were obviously pretty well established. Lee, I don't know how well he certainly wasn't on like Halladay levels, but he was still known as a very good pitcher that the Phillies went out and got. And obviously,
when they
Oswalt,
traded for him in 2009, he's an all-star. I mean, he only had a couple seasons under his belt, but yeah,
he might have had a Cy Young.
He might have. Then. Yeah, I think
he might have. So the 3 of them were all well established when the Phillies got him. I feel like Wheeler is kind of distinct in this, in that his brilliance was only glimpsed in like some brief windows in the majors before he came to Philadelphia. He had a half season here, a couple months there. In his debut season, he became the youngest Mets pitcher to record at least 12 strikeouts in a game since Doc Gooden, which, that's going to get you on the map. Then shoulder stiffness, inconsistent command, lots of walks, couple of tendon tears, Tommy John surgery, a follow-up surgery, more elbow discomfort, tons of plasma injections along the way. It keeps going. Velocity drop, bicep tendonitis, reporters questioning his usage based on when he started to feel discomfort. The Mets signed Jason Vargas, presumably to take Wheeler's spot. He has a bad spring, which seems to confirm this. Then he's finally healthy, but they jam him back down in the minors. Vargas gets hurt. Wheeler comes back, dominates, gets shut down in September. The next year's 2019. The Mets say they want to keep him as free agency looms. Obviously, they don't. The Phillies sign him, and all the up and down kind of just goes away. He's been remarkably stable since coming to the Phillies. You can call out, I'm sure, different stretches perhaps in which he's looked human. You can talk about the spike in runs allowed he had in 2023, finished with an ERA closer to 4 than 2 that year. But that same year, he finished 6th in National League Cy Young voting and won a Gold Glove, kind of just for fun. So as Wheeler dominates and firmly enters the debate of like the best Phillies starting pitchers of all time, one difference you can see here that differentiates his narrative is that he's a free agent the Phillies signed, and he really didn't truly lock in health-wise, output-wise, command-wise, luck-wise until he got here. And I'm not saying this to give credit to any particular person or talk about like the magic of baseball and the Phillies or whatever. It's just that is something that's very unique, I feel, in his legacy among some of the best Phillies pitchers, that it took coming here to really lock things into place, which I think is really notable for him. There is a comparison for this, by the way, but it's Curt Schilling, and I don't want to talk about him.
I'm assuming you also brought all that up just so we can all crap on the Mets, because that is an extraordinary.
That's all part of it. Yeah,
that's an extraordinary amount of things to have gone wrong with this guy who is just right now untouchable. They're barely the same pitcher. Like, I completely forgot that they signed Jason Vargas to take his place and then shoved him in the minors. Like, that's Zack Wheeler you're talking about. He is so far from that now. Like, there are many, many moments that I just don't even remember he was a Met. I'm sure there are people on the Mets who don't remember he was a Met, mostly to stop themselves from crying to sleep at night.
Yeah, I was going to say that's got to be more of like an age thing, because the people, they remember all too well that Zack Wheeler was on the Mets. If they weren't having like a successful era or of sorts ish at the moment, then like Wheeler having success with the Phillies would be hitting them even harder.
It is interesting. Yeah, I mean, it is interesting, Justin, the kind of comparison you made there, and I think Schilling is a close comparison. I think Wheeler may have had a little bit more success. Schilling had his first success with Philadelphia. I mean, Wheeler had a little bit of success. That's why he was able to secure like a big free agent contract from Philadelphia, because he had gotten a little bit of success with New York. Schilling really was kind of seen as like a disappointing prospect before Philadelphia got him, and then he blossomed in with the Phillies. So, but it is really interesting, like you said, they haven't developed and many of their own star pitchers. Cole Hamels is one of them. But I wrote an article a couple of weeks ago about where does Zack Wheeler rank? What is he trending towards in terms of like all-time greats on the Phillies? We may have discussed it on the podcast last time we did this. I don't remember, but nobody's going to pass Steve Carlton. But when you start looking at what he's doing, he's as dominant as Roy Halladay ever was in his time in Philadelphia. Right now, Zack Wheeler is as dominant as Roy Halladay was, and he's done it for a longer stretch of time than Roy Halladay did it in Philadelphia, specifically in Philadelphia. And when you look at Jim Bunning and Robin Roberts and all those guys, they're always going to have the counting stats over Zack Wheeler because Zach didn't start this run until he was 30. What we're seeing is this. It is truly crazy how in his 20s, Zack Wheeler was an oft-injured, kind of disappointing, tantalizingly talented pitcher who simply couldn't stay on the field long enough to get it all together. And then suddenly in his 30s, he's transformed into one of the most durable, high-octane, reliable, innings-eating, high-velocity pitchers that baseball has seen in years. It really is incredible that he's doing this in his 30s, and he couldn't stay healthy in his 20s. It really is a fascinating career arc for Zack Wheeler, and I kind of wonder, as he's been the best pitcher in baseball since he came to Philadelphia in 2020. You look at all of the numbers, he's essentially number one or number two. I kind of want to get a sense from you guys. Liz, I'll start with you. How many more seasons does he have to put together before maybe you consider him a Hall of Famer? Because I think the traditional ways we put Hall of Fame pitchers in the Hall of Fame are going away. 300 wins is not going to be a thing anymore. I don't even think 200 wins is going to be a thing anymore. The way pitchers are used nowadays, it's probably not 3,000 strikeouts. It's probably more like 2,500 strikeouts. You know, the numbers, the keystone numbers that you need for a pitcher to get into the Hall of Fame are going to change over this next generation of starting pitchers simply because of their usage and how the game has changed. So I'm curious from you, how many, he's got another, 3 years on his contract in Philadelphia? If he pitches like this through the end of his contract, does that get it done?
I think it might. If you could show like a big chunk of time where he was just consistently good, I think that'll do it, because I think Felix Hernandez is going to make it to the Hall of Fame. You know,
yeah.
King Felix has all this allure of a pitcher who just who was so good for just a single stretch of time, and just you look at the one end and it was just really bad. But that doesn't discount what he did. And I think especially if it's at the end of his career when he was older, I think the Hall of Fame is I think they'll really go for that. You know, there aren't going to be a lot of pitchers like we saw making the Hall of Fame anymore. You know, I think it's going to be a tough draw for some of these guys until the Hall of Fame age average goes down a little bit, for whatever reason it might. Until that happens, I think it might be a little tough, but Wheeler is going to hit the Hall of Fame in 8 years, you would assume, 8-9 years, and that'll be the perfect time for a guy like him to go in front of the voters and for them to look at his stats and be like, holy crap, maybe he didn't win a Cy Young, but that doesn't matter as much. Chase Utley's probably going to make the Hall of Fame without an MVP.
Yeah.
You know, that stuff is just not as important anymore because people finally understand that awards are inherently unfair.
Yeah, and if there's more of a turn towards focus away from counting stats and more towards what's the alternative for like strikeouts per nine and like
slightly advanced stats.
Just more, I guess. With more focus on those types of stats, which is I think a more realistic view for these more modern pitchers, because if you're trying to hold somebody to a standard from another era, well, that's not the standard because it's a different standard now. So it just changes what the standard is. So I feel like Wheeler, if he has several more years of pitching like this in him, I mean, how can you not put a guy like that in the Hall of Fame with the numbers he's putting up now? I mean, it's just silly. Like, he's going to probably have his third straight year of at least 200 strikeouts. He's already finished, we talk about him not winning a Cy Young. Well, the writers are kind of in charge of that. And they're also in charge of voting him into the Hall of Fame. So if they want to blame themselves for not voting him for years where he could have won the Cy Young, like in 2021, like in 2024, then, okay, I don't know how you hold that against him. That was you who decided to let him finish second instead of first, twice. And that's 2 out of the 3 times he's finished in the top 10 of Cy Young voting since just coming to Philadelphia, a time when he's also, by the way, gotten MVP votes as well. So I don't know how you argue against Zack Wheeler going to the Hall of Fame if he does more of this several more times.
I 100% agree. And I do think, you're going to see pitchers getting into the Hall of Fame with 150 wins, with 2,000 strikeouts. But I have always been somebody who believes that if you are one of the 2 or best players at your position for the better part of a decade, you're a Hall of Famer. And it's not the Hall of Stats, right? It's the Hall of Fame. You know, I mean, he is one of this generation's most iconic pitchers, especially when you consider his postseason accolades too, and everything he's done in the playoffs. You factor all that stuff in. I think if he can, he needs another couple of years of this. I think another couple of years of doing this. But my goodness, there was a little concern. I had a little concern this year coming into the season about Zack Wheeler, just because he's getting older and all the innings he's accumulated. Will we see a step back? And instead, he's having the best season of his career here at age 35. So really,
I'll go a step further and say he doesn't even need to be this good for the rest of his career if he wins the Cy Young and a World Series this season.
Yeah,
I think that takes
right.
the pressure off the next couple of years.
Yeah,
completely. Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. You're right. Zack Wheeler is an all-star, as is Kyle Schwarber. The Phillies have 2 all-stars on the roster, the same number as the Washington Nationals, which of course makes all the sense in the world because it's a really great system that we have. Trea Turner, Christopher Sanchez, Ranger Suarez all did not get into the All-Star game. I didn't think Turner would get in because of a numbers game, but I assume that would be because Mookie Betts also got in. And Mookie Betts did not make the National League All-Star team this year. Only 2 shortstops. 3 shortstops were taken, I think it was. No, 2 shortstops. You have Ellie De La Cruz and who was voted in? Francisco Lindor are the 2 National League shortstops to get into the All-Star game this year. Curious what you guys think, who you guys think. Well, first of all, let's talk about the guys who made it, Kyle Schwarber and Zack Wheeler. Justin, Zack Wheeler looks like he'll probably start the All-Star game, I think. Is that kind of where we're trending? I'm not sure where he pitches, when he pitches, Zack Wheeler, this coming week. I know that factors into whether or not he's even going to be able to pitch in the game, to where his spot in the rotation comes. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday would be, that might be a little tricky for him to get in the game. Maybe if it's just an inning or 2, which it would be, that probably he'd be able to do that.
Maybe they move him around. Maybe they shuffle the rotation to give him that special treatment. But yeah, I mean, Wheeler, I think, should be the starter. I want to say like they owe him, but I don't want that to mean that that's now in place of the Cy Young. He should win if he keeps pitching like this. I don't know. It'll be cool. It would be very cool for him to be the starting pitcher in the All-Star game. I feel like that kind of, in a way, as far as like all-star feelings go, kind of makes up for only having 2. If one of them's the starting pitcher, that's like, that's as good as like a spot and a half kind of thing. And if Schwarber was participating in the home run derby, I'd make the same argument, but he said he wasn't, and that's
why,
fine.
Kyle?
Hey, look, honestly,
next year, he said, maybe next year.
I'm fine with a low-key presence at the All-Star game for the Phillies this year.
Fair enough.
Totally fine with
Fair
it.
enough.
Last year was crazy, and next year's going to be even crazier.
Oh, yeah.
I'm
That's
sure
true,
there will be
too.
enough Phillies-wise next season at the All-Star game. So this
If
year,
Schwarber's here next year.
I'm not even referring to Schwarber specifically. I'm referring to him just being one of 2 All-Stars, and I'm fine with him not being in the home run derby. Obviously it would be cool, but I'm cool with that decision. I'm cool with everything just kind of being more relaxed and low key. And yeah, I mean, he totally deserves to be there. We talk about what a unique player he is, and you look at the numbers and they're like weird, and no one, but like as that kind of player, he's having a great season. As that kind of player, he's slugging, he hits lefties like nobody else in the business, and you see the fruits of that every night. He's 5th in home runs with 27. So yeah, that's a guy who can be on the All-Star team, so he's totally deserved. And obviously Wheeler, you don't even need to talk about it. That's an All-Star right there. Well, so yeah, I'm cool with it just being the 2 of them.
And Liz, I'll say too, Kyle Schwarber, I know he's had some times this year where there's been some slumps, but I don't think we've seen the streakiness from him here in 2025 that we've seen in previous seasons. I mean, there have been some slumps, but he does seem to pull himself out of them a lot quicker here this season, which has really saved this offense. We haven't seen like an entire month where Schwarber is nowhere to be found.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, and he deserves to be an all-star only because what guy in his 30s just suddenly learns how to hit lefties? Just like to the extent that he has been. Like,
it's crazy.
His ability to hit lefties has saved the Phillies a number of times this season because, Kyle Schwarber is doing it. So he definitely deserves to be an all-star, and he's been one of the all-stars of the Phillies. He's played almost every game.
Yeah.
And I'll
he
say,
hasn't
John, is
screwed up in the field like Dick Castellanos. Granted, he doesn't play a fielding position, but
Very little.
I would say, John, June was a rough month for him, but even with that being the rough month where he like struck out more than any other month so far this year and his batting average dropped down to 214, that's the stat you don't really measure Kyle Schwarber on.
Correct.
Because he was still slugging over 400 when he was hitting 214 in June, and he still hit 6 home runs for you. So, that's just, again, it's the kind of player he is.
Yeah. He's their best offensive player, and it's not even close. I mean, you could maybe make the argument for Trea Turner, but I think in terms of pure impact, Kyle Schwarber is this team's best offensive player. He's, again, the one player they could least afford to lose. I mean, I think like we saw, you could afford to lose Bryce Harper for a little bit of time, and the Phillies kept winning. I think they'd find it much harder to maintain their offense without Kyle Schwarber in the lineup because there's just no one there who can hit home runs the way that he can, and that's really how he helps them in such a big way. So obviously some snubs with Trea Turner not getting on the All-Star team, Christopher Sanchez, Ranger Suarez. It is incredible to me that the best starting rotation in baseball has one starter on it. One pitcher from this Phillies pitching staff is on the All-Star team. The San Francisco Giants have 3 pitchers on the All-Star team, which is
again,
just
more Phillies disrespect. I'm just going to say
bananas. Absolutely. The disrespect is just smacking us in the face.
Chris Sanchez just had an 8-inning start.
Yeah.
He was incredible. Ranger Suarez has come back and after, a rough beginning has just sort of picked up where he left off early last year. Like, these are good pitchers that deserve to be in the All-Star game. Am I all that upset that they're not? I mean, I am upset. Like,
your voice sounds a little upset.
I am upset in that way, but when I think about it, I'm just like, maybe they should just have vacations with their families. Maybe that's their reward.
I think Ranger would have liked to pitch in the All-Star game because he didn't get to pitch last year. Christopher Sanchez, I can imagine you might be right about that. And Trea Turner started last year, played a bunch of innings. I'm sure he doesn't really mind not going to the game either, but I'll ask, who's the biggest snub, Justin? Who is the biggest snub of the Phillies from this All-Star team this year?
Out of the 3, out of anybody, I guess. But
if there's anybody else you think was a bigger one.
Yeah, no, it's really tough to turn away from like the National League leader in hits and say that he is not an all-star in Trea Turner. But my instinct is Sanchez because he's been around for the full season. He's got about 25 more innings than Suarez. Suarez, they've still got on a pitch limit, or at least they did his last time out. And while Suarez is probably the most stifling of anybody in that rotation, including Wheeler, like that's his specialty. He can just sit on a lineup's head for 7 innings and they just can't do anything. Dan Gelston wrote, Suarez has not allowed more than 1 earned run since June 7th at Pittsburgh.
That's a long time.
He's permitted 1 or 0 earned runs in 9 of his last 12 starts.
And by the way, he did not win Pitcher of the Month last month because of Zack Wheeler. Like, that tells you how good Zack Wheeler was, that he won it over Ranger Suarez, who just did what you said, which was crazy.
All you ever hear is like 3 of the top 4 pitchers in like FWAR are Phillies in the National League. And then also Jesus Luzardo might throw a no-hitter or get shelled into the Delaware River, depending on what day it is.
Who knows?
So it's always fun to see those stats. And that's why I keep leaning towards Sanchez. They don't pick all-stars by specific pitches, but if they did, Christopher Sanchez's changeup would at least be in the all-star game. He's got one of the best pitches in baseball in his changeup, and Aaron Nola was just telling Tyler Kepner that everybody's ahead of that pitch every time. Everybody, every time. Sanchez shows up in the majors with this gritty, obligatory changeup and then moves his index finger over a little further than he has it when he's throwing his sinker one day. And then, bam, one of the best pitches in baseball happens.
It's hilarious to me that the Phillies tried to build an offensive powerhouse and accidentally lucked into the best rotation in baseball with some dudes that they had.
Yeah. You say luck, but with all the Zack Wheeler praise going around, if you're giving Matt Klentak credit for acquiring Zack Wheeler, well, guess who noticed a guy in the Rays farm system who could throw 98 and stood 6.5 feet tall. So once another piece of the Matt Klentak, what is that called? Rehabilitation it falls into place here. So I say Sanchez, he's got fewer caveats to his success because Suarez, missed time with injury and everything. Though I don't really have any complaints about seeing any of these guys in the All-Star game. Like I said, I'm happy with a more low-key year, but these are objectively snubs. I just want Ranger to stay healthy, but Sanchez also, he deserves to be there, I think. He's just got a more consistent, stable amount of success since the start of the year. But if it was determined by coolness, Ranger Suarez would probably be starting the game.
Yes, I think that's true.
And as I think about the biggest snub, Trea Turner is having one heck of a season at shortstop. I think there's every argument to be made that he was a bigger snub than either of the two pitchers that didn't get selected, just based on the fact he leads the National League in hits. He is playing exactly how you wanted him to play at the start of the season. I've said this, I think, on the last 3 podcasts with regards to Trea Turner. And it really is. He's been very consistent this year, which is not something we have seen from him in his first 2 seasons in Philadelphia. He's been outstanding. The defense comes and goes. He made a bad error on a double play ball over the weekend and got very lucky. And the next hitter hits another ground ball right to him for a step on second, throw to first double play in the Ranger Suarez game. So, I think it's probably Christopher Sanchez is the biggest snub. And I think probably Ranger Suarez is too, followed by Trea Turner. But it's really, really close because Turner is having an outstanding season. I think he's having a better season than he had in the first half last year when he was the All-Star starter at shortstop. And I am surprised that if they were going to only take, the 2 shortstops, that Mookie Betts wasn't the third one, first of all, but that Trea Turner couldn't find his way onto the roster if Mookie Betts wasn't going to be an All-Star.
Mookie's hitting 250, man. This isn't a stud Mookie Betts year, unfortunately.
Yeah, I guess not. I haven't been paying close enough attention, I suppose.
And I think part of the reason why Turner wasn't picked is because they still want every team to have one All-Star. And they couldn't apparently make room for anybody else. They had to bring all 3 of the Giants pitchers.
And see, that's my thing.
Them.
Yeah, that's the thing. We've talked about this every year when we do the All-Star game, because I'm one of the few people, I think, who likes having a team having one All-Star representative, because I think it gives fans of every team a reason to watch the game. As a Phillies fan who grew up in the late 80s and early 90s, there were a number of years when I wasn't sure that any of my players were going to get on the team, and it was nice to know that at least one would be Pat Neshek onto the team. One would be Ricky Batalico onto the team. We'd have at least one reason to watch, and this was during a time when you didn't have interleague play, so this was your only time to watch a Phillies pitcher or Phillies player play against the other league's best players. For people who weren't watching baseball before interleague play, watching a Phillies player go up against a Yankees pitcher or a Phillies pitcher go up against a Red Sox hitter was mind-blowing to somebody in the 1980s. Like, you just couldn't. It was bizarre to see.
Are we all thinking the same thing?
Well, I know why. Like, everybody remembers John Kruk and Randy Johnson, but when they talk about that leading up to it, it's like they're talking up like an alien ship landed and Randy Johnson stepped out of it, and John Kruk was like, "I'm the one that's got to go meet this guy." Like, I just don't know about this. Like, they were from different planets,
Am I
and that's
truly
something
the best representative?
It's going to be completely lost on other people. I mean, that's just the nature of the game changing.
Well, and that's right, because John Kruk said, I've never faced him, and I don't ever.
He's like, I'm not facing him. I'll quit. I don't care. What does he say? He's like, I'll go home.
Whole other league. There was no reason to face him.
His exact quote was, "I don't want any part of that."
No. And yet he went and faced him in the batter's box, and we all saw what happened. So, all right. We've been talking about this Phillies rotation, specifically the top 3. You can throw Jesus Luzardo in there. I'm very curious to see what Aaron Nola is going to look like when he joins the rotation. Who knows when that will be, but it sounds like sometime after the All-Star break. But I think we can all see that this starting rotation is really special. Certainly this season that Zack Wheeler is having is really, really special. This probably will be, if he continues on like this, his best season. And it would be an absolute crime for the Phillies to waste this type of starting rotation, and specifically the type of pitching they're getting from Zack Wheeler, Ranger Suarez, Christopher Sanchez, Zack Wheeler in particular, which is making me rethink my preseason thinking about what you do at the trade deadline. How all in do you go? How much do you go in on one season to try and strike while the iron's hot, keeping the window open versus taking advantage of an opportunity? And I'm starting to come around to the thought of the Phillies need to be very aggressive at the trade deadline. And I've gotten to a point where I'm willing to deal almost anyone. I mean, I think Andrew Painter might still be my absolute no-go, but I have become way more open to moving pretty much everybody else in the farm system. For the right player, for a player like who can really make a difference specifically for the offense, but also for the bullpen, obviously to get a late inning guy. But I look at this offense, and I think this is what most Phillies fans are struggling with right now. We all enjoy a first place team. We all enjoy watching this team play well. They're winning series, right? They have like a 500 record since June, but that was a really bad stretch at the beginning of June. Since then, they've been fine. They're winning more series than they're losing, and they're coming out on top in most of these games. But it's ugly, and the offense continues to look like the thing that will do them in October. And so there's just in my soul there is a cry for some kind of change, some kind of addition that will help mitigate what we've seen from this offense, how, Nick Castellanos or Real Muto or Stott, and how you just from left field, center field, you're just not getting anything offensively from most of those different positions. This is a season where Dave Dombrowski, I really do think, needs to go all in. I'm not normally a big all-in guy, but we're seeing a historic season from Zack Wheeler from this starting rotation. We're not going to see this again. So I'm curious, has what you've seen from the starting rotation, Justin, specifically Zack Wheeler, is it changing your mindset at all about how aggressive Dave Dombrowski should be at the All-Star break? Are you still kind of just like, don't blow the farm system away, keep the window open, let your prospects come up and try and, refuel the system as you roll along and go with what you've got?
I guess I mean, being asked that question makes me feel like I too am veering closer towards, let's go for it. I mean, this is a situation where it's now not just, this is their fourth try, and who knows who will and who will not be here next year, and not in the sense of like, what if these guys don't get to all be friends anymore? In the sense of like, what if you lose Kyle Schwarber and the replacement isn't as good? What if you lose JT Realmuto and the replacement isn't as good? And that's its own question, but like, the pressure, I don't know. I mean, is the pressure on? Because then I always say they've worked to elevate the franchise past, windows being open. And it's more like, we're going to try. We're going to have a really good team. And if we got to retool, we'll retool. It won't take long. We'll be back in the postseason. We'll have another shot sooner rather than later. But I guess all of that is just a nice way to circumvent actually answering the question. And I mean, I'm not ready to let go of Painter. And I'm not saying I'm excited to trade any of these other guys who we've been following over the past few years, but the truth is, none of these guys are like even as hot as prospects as they were a year ago. Aiden Miller is not having as great a year. Justin Crawford, they've shown improvement a couple of times, but I wouldn't say that these are like leaps and bounds. These are our, this position of the future, definitely mark it down kind of guys, other than Andrew Painter, who has been factored into the plan this year before this year even started. So, I feel like if it means Dave Dombrowski gets to widen his search more because they're willing to let go of more guys, then I think you're right, because the historic nature of the rotation really does change that. It's not just year 4 of a campaign where we really thought we would have won by now. It's like, how many more times are you going to be able to rely on this? You learned that lesson with the bullpen. For 2 years, you had a good bullpen in Philadelphia, and all you're thinking the whole time is, when's this going to end? Well, it ended. You don't have a really good bullpen anymore. So the nature of pitching, and the nature of how teams can kind of fall apart like that. So, I feel like there's more reasons to go for it than there are to play it close to the chest, honestly. I really do. So, the Phillies, it's interesting. I think you talk about like what people have been frustrated about with this team, and there's this frustration that they haven't really like raced out ahead, even with like the Mets struggling and the Braves struggling. And this is very similar to 1978 when Tug McGraw actually wrote a column in the paper talking about how people like are mad at the Phillies and frustrated with the Phillies because they weren't racing out to this 15-game lead. And he was like, well, there's reasons for this. One is that, when you're good, like the Phillies have been for a few years, people put a target on your back, and bad teams play better against you, so the competition gets tougher. Also, the pressure put on the team by fans and the press about how they didn't have a 15-game lead in the division was paradoxically preventing them from having a 15-game lead in the division. It starts to feel like I'm describing like a dream I had at some points of this.
Yeah.
But yeah, the last point he said, and the only one with stats behind it, was hitting. And he was like, the Phillies have been great at hitting the last few years, but by now more pitchers have the book on them than before. They needed to adjust, and they hadn't fully done so, but it'll come. And that's kind of paralleling here in that the strengths of your team aren't necessarily reliable year to year. You can sign a guy like Bryce Harper to, the deal he's going to have for the rest of his career. But at some point, there's going to be strengths that you're not going to be able to rely on anymore. And all I'm talking about when I'm talking to these other writers and media members about the teams they cover on the Friday episodes of Hittin' Season is that this team relies on its starting pitching like it's their spine. And so when you have a strength that's that reliable, you got to take advantage of it because it can go away, and it will go away, maybe next year, maybe not for a couple years, but that eventually strength fades and you got to adjust. So before that happens, it would be great to take advantage of having a historic amount of strength in your starting rotation.
Liz, how do you feel?
I'm with you. I'm with both of you. This is the time to open up every drawer, throw open every cabinet, look for everything, examine everything, and do what you have to do because the team as it is has a ceiling. And the only way it gets better than what it is if you add someone new to it. You need to add someone new, something new, they need someone in the bullpen. They really, really need an outfielder. For the love of God, one outfielder who can hit and field his position.
Or a third baseman who can move Bohm over to first and put Harper back in the outfield, which Harper has said he is willing to do. Because I'm going to talk about Harper in just a second, but I know Eugenio Suarez and Alex Bregman are going to be free agents at the end of the season. So essentially, you're getting them on one-year deals. It's expected Bregman's going to opt out of his contract, which he can do. So I know you don't want to give up a major piece for a rental, but Eugenio Suarez is going to hit 40 home runs this year, and he hits from the right side of the plate. Alex Bregman may not hit quite that many, but he's going to be 25 to 30 home runs, and he's also having an outstanding offensive season for the Red Sox. If they're moving players, he could be one of the players available. How aggressive do you get for somebody like that? Like you put one of those guys in the middle of your lineup, in between Schwarber and Harper or some combination. All of a sudden, that lineup looks a whole lot different. Yeah, I know you're shuttling some different people around, but you kind of solve your left field problem by putting Bryce Harper out there. Even if Harper is down this year, he still leaps and bounds better than any kind of Max Kepler, Otto Kemp platoon situation you have going on out there. And then you've got Bohm over at first base, and you've got Eugenio Suarez at third base. I think we got to stop thinking of like, well, gee, who's the right-handed hitting outfielder we can get to platoon with Max Kepler? Maybe we shoot for something a little bit higher than that. But listening to Dave Dombrowski's comments over the last week or so, it does not sound, and I know he's not going to tip his hand, but I got to say, over the last couple of years, what Dave Dombrowski has said leading up to the trade deadline, it's kind of been what they've done. Like, there hasn't been a whole lot of subterfuge from Dave Dombrowski the last 3 years. He's kind of soft-pedaled it leading up to it, and then soft-pedaled it at the deadline. I don't think he's working some sly game here where he is, like, oh, I got all these plans in the works, and they'll never see them coming. I don't think that's the Dave Dombrowski we're dealing with right now. So I don't know. This is, if they went out and if they traded for Ramon Laureano, who's having a very good offensive season, okay. That'd be fine. Byron Buxton from the Twins, again, that could be a really fun addition. There's a lot of risk there too. And for somebody like that, you may have to give up somebody you really don't want to give up. Like, there's nobody out there that's just like, oh my gosh, great fit, right-handed hitter, position of need, 2 years of team control. Here, have Aiden Miller. There's just, there really isn't that. Like, there's going to be some kind of pearl clutching no matter what they do. But I think this is the year you do it. This is the year you make a move that makes you uncomfortable as a general manager, because you have a team that this might be their best chance at doing this.
it can always feel like an overpay on July 30th or whenever the deadline is. But by August 15th, when that guy's mashing for you in exactly the way you needed somebody to, you're not thinking about what he cost at all. And when you're holding that trophy, you're not thinking about what he cost at all. And later, when that prospect you gave up is really excelling with the team you gave him to, you can still look over at that World Series trophy and be like, yeah, what, clearly there was something to gain from this. So, there's always the risk that they make a trade that in some people's minds impacts the future of Phillies baseball, or changes how they thought the next few seasons would come together with a prospect they really liked. There's always going to be heartbreak when it comes to prospects in one way or another. But it's just tough to deny that, I don't know if the Phillies even planned on having a rotation this utterly dominant this season.
No.
So, again, taking advantage of that should be paramount, because if this just results in another, playoffs and then early exit, what really at the end of the day makes it different from the other seasons,
Right.
It'll be a great video yearbook where you talk about all these great stats your starting pitchers put up, but ultimately, if you didn't do everything you could to win at the trade deadline, then I don't know what to tell you. I mean, that's just a rough place to find yourself when the season's over. So yeah, I don't know. It's also just every year when you're a team in contention, tough to deny the appeal of whatever. Just get the people we need as the days between you and the trade deadline get closer and closer and closer. It's really hard to deny that instinct. And honestly, the Phillies farm system has some interesting guys and some fun guys and cool guys that you followed or whatever. But if you can trade 3 or 4 of those guys who aren't Andrew Painter and come back with 2 players you really need, I don't know. I've followed the Phillies minors more closely the past few years than I had in the time before. But even I'm sitting here saying, yeah, I don't know. I mean, Justin Crawford's still hitting a lot of ground balls, man. So if you were trying to change that, I don't know if it's changing.
Toss a Bryson Stott in there, and you've got yourself a nice package somewhere. And I love Bryson Stott. Believe me, I adore him. But you could send him out the door and get something better back. I think you could if you pair him with some prospects. Eugenio Suarez sounds like a great addition. He's going to hit a lot of home runs, which the Phillies by and large have not been doing.
John, would you trade Aiden Miller and Justin Crawford for Eugenio Suarez if that was the offer?
I would probably want to get a reliever back as part of that exchange. I probably wouldn't do it both of those guys for just him. I think that's too rich for a rental. I would trade one of them. I would trade Aiden Miller for Eugenio Suarez.
It's like Aiden Miller and Eduardo Tait for Eugenio Suarez.
Yes.
Yeah, I would do that.
I would do that.
That's probably closer. That's probably closer to what you're looking at. One of those headliners, and then another guy whose name you know.
Yeah,
but it's not close to the majors.
Those are 2 top 100 prospects.
Yeah,
and that's kind of what you need to do at the trade deadline. If you're going to go for it, that's going for it. That's what the definition of going for it is. And color me someone who's not as when have the Phillies since Ryne Sandberg? I'm racking my brain trying to think of a time when the Phillies traded away a prospect that ended up blossoming into a superstar someplace else. I can't think of one.
You can't even count J.P. Crawford because he was up in the majors for a while.
I'll say Carlos Carrasco. Really well. Carlos Carrasco and the Cliff Lee deal in 2009.
Oh, God, you're right.
They rode Cliff Lee to the World Series. And I'm telling you right now, no one regrets that deal.
No.
What Cliff Lee did in 2009, taking them to the World Series, totally worth Carlos Carrasco. And Carrasco had a great career with Cleveland. But there just hasn't been, Travis d'Arnaud in the Halladay trade.
That was the name that popped into my head.
Yeah, great career, but not somebody that you're wistful for missing out on.
No, there's really no one.
So what are we hemming and hawing for? I'm growing with each and as I watch this pitching staff, as I watch this rotation, I do not want to waste it. I do not want to waste it, and I think this is the year to not waste it. All right, last thing before we wrap up. How worried are you about Bryce Harper? Since coming back from the injured list, 3 for 17 at the plate, 8 strikeouts. since coming back again. We kind of figured that it would be a little bit of a time for him to get his feet back under him, but there's a concern out there that the wrist just isn't right, and he knows it, and he's still not 100% back. I mean, I think we all know he's not 100%, and I think the idea is that he's not going to be 100% this year, but that the idea is that he can play through it, or that he can be somewhat productive through it. He looked as lost this weekend against Cincinnati as I've ever seen him, and really we're looking at it's been a lost first half for Bryce Harper. 252, 365, 426 slash, a 791 OPS. For a lot of players, that's a pretty solid first half. But when he's your superstar, he's your guy, the power's not there. He's just not. He just hasn't impacted many games this year. Like what? I'm trying to think of like what are how many games has Bryce Harper? Do you remember like that was a great Bryce Harper game this year? There haven't been
nothing.
There haven't been any. So it's been just a lost first half.
Didn't he have
Bryce
a multi-home run game at some point?
Oh, I think maybe.
Not to be that guy.
He might have.
He did.
I think he did have a multi-home run game. Was it a 3? Did he have a 3 home run game this year?
That was last year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, those have been few and far between, and I have no doubt that he's not going to go 3 for 17 in every series moving forward. But at the same time, he doesn't look right. And Liz, I guess I just want to ask what your level of concern is for Bryce Harper here in the second half. Do you think it's more likely that he figures it out and we get a couple months of a hot Bryce Harper, or we've reached the midpoint of his contract in Philadelphia? Like officially, like last week was the midpoint of his contract. So it's absolutely obviously the contract has been worth it no matter what happens from this point on. But are we seeing a point in Bryce Harper's career now where, man, the injuries are just going to kind of be there, and you're worried about the wrist all season, and is it going to affect him? What is your thinking? Where are you at on Bryce Harper right now?
I don't want to presume anything about the future because we have evidence that guys in their mid-30s can do great things.
Right.
So I don't want to opine too much on the future, but I think I'm not expecting too much from him for the rest of the year. His desire to play trumps any concern about his physical well-being. And despite the fact that people have said over and over, please don't do that, he's going to do what he does. And so if he's not 100%, then I can't expect, it's unfair to expect anything from him. I won't. He's not the guy that I'm going to be looking to change the game, to hit a big lead-changing home run, to do something, acrobatic or theatrical. That's just not who he is this year. It's sad, but until he puts his health first, which he's gonna have to start doing. He has to start doing that at some point. But until he does it, this is just going to be his story.
And that, Justin, is one of the other reasons why I think it's even more important for the Phillies to kind of go all in at the trade deadline, because I think they are missing a big offensive weapon in Bryce Harper, and I don't know that it's coming back this year. And so if you don't want to fall apart in the playoffs and go through an offensive drought like they did against the Mets last year, you got to have somebody else in there who can pick up some of that slack that you're not getting from Bryce Harper.
Right. I mean, it's like, think about this moment in time where we're sitting here talking about potentially one of the greatest Phillies rotations ever, but the guy who was brought here to be the center of a World Series title here in Philadelphia is not having a very good year. I don't really think about the future with Bryce Harper. I take a very Gene Mauch approach where it's just, let's win today's game. That's literally where all of my attention is going to go, into today's game. And then after that, we'll start thinking about tomorrow. And Harper, I feel like you have really no choice to think that way. A, because of the kind of player he is, where when he is not hitting, when he's slumping, he does look lost. This isn't the first time in his career he's looked lost. The worrisome part to me is the wrist and how much healthier it is and how much of an issue it's going to be moving forward, because we've seen plenty of guys who, either they have a wrist injury and they never really get their swing back for a while, or it's revealed, months later, oh, he had like a wrist thing, and that was like contributing to his struggles. I mentioned Mookie Betts struggling this year. I mean, Bryce's numbers are kind of down there on the same level as Mookie Betts, and obviously they're different in. No, they're not. They're the same exact age. How about that? Glad I checked. Yeah, so they're the exact same age, and that's another superstar who's there to win titles and did last year. But still, the point is that guys who are at the top of their game can really get into holes like this. And I know with Harper, again, the wrist part is the worrisome part. I want to see that get better. I want to see him hit just to know that the wrist isn't holding him back, because when he gets into holes like this, when he goes into slumps, he looks utterly, he'll look Castellanos at the plate when he's like whiffing and just striking out on 3 pitches, because the harder the more he's struggling, the harder he pushes. He truly thinks he can homer his way out of a hole. And then last year when he hit 3 home runs in a game, he did homer his way out of a hole. So I think Bryce Harper can get back on track, kind of, just give him the time and he'll do it. There's a chance he has a solid second half. But like you're saying, this is another indication of a ticking clock. I'm not saying this is the end of Bryce Harper, but it's just showing you that, like, hey, here's what a less superstar studly Bryce Harper might look like, and you got to be able to survive that. Fortunately, the Phillies have. They're still in first place despite missing Bryce Harper for a big chunk of the season, and when he's here, he's not putting up the numbers you're used to seeing. But he's got some time. There's still a whole second half for him to come through, and the Phillies have proven that he's not the strength they need to lean on all of the time. So I don't know. A lot of this is going to come down to the deadline. A lot of this is going to come down to what this Phillies team looks like after the deadline, and what strengths and what vulnerabilities they choose to address, because there's some changes they can make that can give them a better shot at what they've been trying to do for the last 4 years.
I'll tell you, when I watch Bryce Harper right now, I get visions I see a lot of like 2011 Chase Utley. Like, Utley's still a productive player, but dealing with the knee issues, like, you could just kind of tell, like, the days of Chase Utley were gone, and you were moving into a different part of Chase Utley's career, where he's still a productive player, but he can't be the guy you're building around anymore. I don't know if that's where we are with Bryce Harper, because I think Harper's a little younger than Utley was at that point, but I don't think it's much.
No, Chase Utley was 32 in 2011. Same as Bryce Harper right now.
Okay. So
same as Mookie Betts as well. I will say, after the period you're talking about, Chase Utley then only went on to make appearances in 3 more playoffs. So
sure,
there is still more to the story.
There's more. Like I said, he didn't.
I mean, they invented a whole new rule with his name in it after that point. Like, he was still impacting the game and also people's legs.
That's right. He didn't crater after 2011 and 2012. He's still a productive. That's what I mean. He was still a productive player. He was still a player on a playoff team. But he changed. Like, he wasn't the superstar anymore. And I'm not saying that that's definitely where we are with Bryce Harper, but there
none
are
of us are saying that it's the end of the Bryce Harper era. And I'm sorry for cutting you off, but also we're mentioning that we're halfway through Bryce Harper's deal. Hey, everybody, you got to be ready for this.
Yeah.
All right?
We said that
You
at the
got to be
beginning.
ready for this. This is what we talked about. This is what we agreed to. We said, give him what he wants to be here next year, whatever that takes. They gave him that. This is going to happen. If it's not now, it'll happen, somewhere down the line, where Bryce Harper just isn't going to be the guy they put on the cover of MLB The Show anymore. It's going to happen to Trea Turner. We thought maybe for a second it already had. Yeah. But, like, this is going to happen. You got to just get in the mindset of, we signed people to, like, lifetime deals. They're not going anywhere, which is also part of my answer of, you kind of got to just get used to things sometimes, because he's not going anywhere.
No,
so you got to just wrap your head around the fact that maybe Bryce Harper, 250 hitter, is a part of this offense. Not now, forever, but, like, at some point down the line, that's gonna happen, because that's what happens to human bodies.
Right. Well, but my reason for saying this is that it should require a different mindset from the people in the front office in terms of
I totally agree.
Yeah.
You know, like, if Dave Dombrowski's still sitting there thinking, our Harper's still the heartbeat of the offense, and he's going to be, that power stroke's coming back, it very well might, and I hope it does, and I hope my pessimism is unfounded, but it might not. And you can mitigate that by going out and actually getting an impact bat at the trade deadline, of which there are some. Despite what Dombrowski tells you, there are some impact bats who might be available at the trade deadline. They're not all 220 hitters with little power and negative wins above replacement. All right, let's finish things up here. Just a couple things to mention real quick if you guys want to talk about these at all. Nationals fired Davey Martinez and Mike Rizzo this week.
Right before the draft.
Right before the draft. Yes,
Nice
the
move,
timing
guys.
was interesting. So, yeah.
No, what GM has been fired before the trade deadline since 2016.
Yeah.
I want to say.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So it's not something that happens a whole lot. And as far as the draft
It's
goes,
hilarious.
that's comical timing. Fangraphs had a great column where they were talking about Mike Rizzo's first round draft picks. Obviously, you have Steven Strasburg, Bryce Harper, Anthony Rendon, Drew Storen. And then, as Fangraphs reads, the drop-off is staggering. There are about like 30 players on the rest of that list that have like less than 1 or negative wins above replacement in their major league careers. And one of them's Dylan Cruz, whose story is still, yet to be written and everything. But at the same time, the drop-off has been very significant. And boy, the Nationals just never really got it together after 2019. And yeah, I mean, yikes. He was the longest tenured GM other than Brian Cashman until now.
Wow.
Did you know that? That's nuts.
That's crazy. Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so
Wow. All right, Phillies are. This is not a good sign. And Phillies embarking on a West Coast road trip going into the All-Star break. This always goes well, right? I mean, you get 3 in their House of Horrors in San Francisco to start off the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. They have an off day Thursday, and then they finish up with 3 in San Diego, a place they generally play pretty well to go into the All-Star break. Not an ideal way to hit into the break on a West Coast road trip, especially in a city where you rarely ever win. But we'll see how that all shakes out this week. Let's finish things up with some final thoughts here, guys. Liz, final thought from you?
sure. My glasses back on for this so I can actually see. My grandmother died this past weekend, and so I wrote a little something. My grandmom, Eleanor, died Saturday morning. She was 93. She was a mother, a wife, a sister, an aunt, a cousin, a friend, a grandmother, a great-grandmother, a kind, no-nonsense woman who never wanted any fuss, and a lifelong Phillies fan. I started writing for Yahoo Sports and podcasting about the Phillies a few months after my grandfather died in 2018, and she was so excited and proud. She never got as far as podcasts in her technological education, but she learned to use a smartphone during COVID and loved texting, especially with emojis. She spent 99% of her life living in or very near to Philadelphia and watched the Phillies pretty much every day. We always talked about the Phillies when we saw each other. She was endlessly concerned about them maintaining a decent level of play, but was never surprised and was typically disgusted when they lost. You wouldn't be either if you'd seen what she'd seen. The Phillies had just reached their 50th year of existence when she was born in 1932. Over her 93 years, she saw 7,688 regular season losses and 6,970 wins. Oh, and 20 ties. She also saw 70 postseason wins and 63 postseason losses. She saw 38 different men manage the Phillies, with Charlie Manuel managing the most and Gene Mauch the second most. She saw 4 Phillies pitchers win the Cy Young and 7 position players win the MVP, with the earliest and the Phillies' first coming when she was just 9 months old. She saw 2 World Series championships, 4 World Series losses, the 1950 Whiz Kids, the 1983 Wheeze Kids, and 1 very Black Friday. She watched Jim Bunning's Father's Day perfect game in 1964, the first in the NL since 1880, Roy Halladay's perfect game in 2010, and 8 more no-hitters. That's what she saw. And every game, I always knew she was watching, except for those Apple TV games and those disastrous Facebook games. Thanks, MLB. It's very weird to think that for the first time in my life, she will not be watching the Phillies with me. But because of the connection we shared, she will always be with me.
That was beautiful, Liz.
Thank you.
Our best to you and your family. And that sounds like a life well lived. So
It was.
really great. Yeah, that's really great. All right, Justin, you want to try and follow that up with some final thoughts?
Yeah,
Try
I
it.
wish
can
you
try
would
if
have
you
gone
want.
to me
Yeah,
first.
I thought you were gonna go to him
I
first, and I almost didn't do it. I'm just like, what is he doing? How does
My
Justin
brain,
follow
I
this?
fritzed out there. I fritzed out. Yeah, sorry about that.
I don't know if it'd be appropriate for me to say anything at this point, other than I've lost 3 grandparents, all some more invested in baseball than the others. But there's just a way when you're watching the game and you know they would have been watching, it still feels like they are watching in a lot of ways. So yeah, that was beautiful, Liz.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
And Justin, I'm sorry I torpedoed what might have been your other final thought. So that's on me.
Podcast is ending exactly the way she would have wanted it to end if she ever listened.
But check out the dirty inning.
Do you want to hear the trade idea I was going to throw at you
Please,
instead?
yes, let's do it. Come on.
Okay. Justin Crawford and Aiden Miller and Eduardo Tait
Oh man.
for Brian Reynolds and David Bednar.
No.
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 Okay,
No.
interesting.
Because of Brian, I was just looking at Brian Reynolds' numbers this year
he
and some of the
sucks
stuff.
out.
Buying low for sure. But
Oof.
we were calling him a 5-tool player not too long ago, and that gives Dave and probably Middleton the ability to feel like, oh, we're like getting a guy. It's another bounce back candidate. This is great. We're
They
gonna
love a
like
bounce
save
back
money
candidate,
or
don't
whatever.
They do love a bounce back.
God,
Like if
they
you can get
do.
for Byron Buxton and a top Twins reliever, now I think I might be interested
I
in
love
that.
Byron Buxton.
Byron Buxton. Really? I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Reynolds is signed through 2030, by the way. He's on an 8-year deal. I totally forgot they gave him an extension, so yikes. Byron Buxton. Man, you got Danny Tartable. That's what you're getting when you're getting Byron Buxton. I'm sorry. I have no interest. I love him as a player, but stay on the field, man. What do we say going into this year? The Twins need Royce Lewis, Byron Buxton, and what's his face, Astros, Correa, to stay on the field. Did that happen?
No.
So, here we are.
Yeah, that would be a lot to give up for an oft-injured player as well. I get you.
Oft injured. I mean,
Oft-injured.
that guy's might as well sleep in the waiting room. Like,
So next to oft injured is his face that you see in the dictionary.
His off-season home is an MRI machine.
God.
Well, yeah,
I'm just
let's empty
thinking
the
about
storm
the
for him.
ramifications of that. It's
might
horrifically
not
bad
work.
for his health. Maybe that's the
That
part. Maybe
might
that's
not
why
work.
he's been off the field.
Yeah,
so
if
much.
that's
man.
true. Now we may have
What
zeroed
if
in
they-
on something.
what if they acquire Andrew McCutcheon as their outfield?
Stop it! Stop it! Stop it! What are you doing?
I don't know.
What are you doing?
Oh.
You're putting stuff into the universe that does not need to be out there. We did that
It's
once.
trade season. I'm just saying names.
Yep.
Next episode will feature us just saying names into the microphones and seeing how we all
Just
react.
asking questions. We're just asking
Ooh.
questions. That's all.
That's my final third. Next episode we're going to be doing Phillies All-Star Trivia.
Ooh,
So
something
that's
exciting
something
for
to
me
look forward to.
lose.
Yeah. Yeah. So for the next roundtable, stay tuned for that, friends. We're going to do some Phillies All-Star Trivia. So I'm going to have to do some reading here over the course of the next week. So
Oh, you're going to
of course,
prepare.
knowing Justin's question is going to be something like, what color socks did John Kruk wear in '93 at the All-Star game? Or like, what beer did he drink after he struck out against, whatever.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry if I made it sound like this would be fun. This will not be fun.
Very well. Good to know. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for this edition of Hittin' Season. And I want to encourage everybody to make sure to check out our YouTube page over at, YouTube. If you do a search for Hittin' Season on YouTube, you can find us there. All of the roundtable episodes are there, so you can watch the show on your smart TV. We'll have some clips of the show up there, too. And don't forget to tell your friends and family members about the podcast version of this show. Of course, you can tell them about the YouTube, but we're also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever it is you get your podcasts. There we are. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. We will talk to you next time right here on Hittin' Season.